In this episode of Student of Life with Joe Hafner, we address the question, why were you created? Joe will examine how you discover your purpose, the 2 schools of thought for how to live out that purpose, 6 steps to creating a fertile environment for self-discovery, and much more. For show notes, links, and other resources, please visit studentoflifepodcast.com/4. That's studentoflifepodcast.com/4.
Hey everybody, I am Joe Hafner and this is Student of Life, the podcast for people seeking personal and professional fulfillment. I'm excited to have you with me today because today we're going to continue talking about the building blocks of fulfillment. Last week we talked about core values, and this week I want to talk about your purpose. Do you believe God created you for a reason? I know I do. I believe every one of us was created for a reason. Every one of us has a purpose why we're here on this earth, and it's up to us to figure out what that purpose is, to go through the exercise of figuring that out so that we can live out the potential that's been placed in us, so that we can serve people in the world in the way that we were created to do. Like I said, last week we talked about core values, so now I want to talk about what God created you for. I just want to start by going over some of the different questions that you might ask yourself that will help you figure out what your purpose is. When you're figuring out your purpose, you want to look at things that give you hints as to why you were created. We're all created to do different things. We're all created with different interests. If you look at the things you do that bring you joy, that's going to be that's going to give you a good idea of what your purpose might be. I know that for me, I get joy from writing. I'm getting ready to publish a book, a novel here shortly, and that's given me great joy to write that. So I know one of my purposes in life is to be a writer. So what brings you joy? Next one, what do you lose yourself in doing? And by that I mean, what are the activities that you do that are so engrossing to you that you lose track of time? That all of a sudden it's 6, 7, 8 hours later and you're looking at the clock saying, holy cow, how did that time go by so fast? And again, going back to my writing, I know that there have been many, many times where I've been really into working on a character or working on a chapter that all of a sudden I look at the clock and I just can't believe how much time's passed. I know other people who do that when they're problem solving, like some engineer types who, when they get into math equations and figuring things, I can't imagine that myself, but I wasn't born to be a math equation guy. What are the areas that you lose yourself? Where in your life are you of the most value to other people? When you are solving some sort of problem for other people, what problem are you solving? What area do people come and ask you to be their go-to person? What area are your friends always asking for your help in doing that? That's going to give you some clues to your purpose. What are you truly great at doing? What are some things that either you do better than anybody you know, or with practice you could do better than anybody you know? That's going to give you some clues as far as that goes. How about this? Where in your life, business, or the work you produce do you have just unrelenting standards, where you're just not willing to put something out there that's anything less than perfect, anything less than high standards? If there's an area where you feel that strongly, there's a good chance that that area is tied to your purpose somehow. Finally, here's a great one to think about. If you were told that going forward in your life, you're only going to be allowed to do one specific activity every day, all the time, and that's it, what would you choose to do? Those are some questions that I think you need to ask yourself when you want to figure out what your purpose is. And so we're going to spend the rest of this podcast talking about leading up to that purpose and figuring out how that purpose is how you use those questions to get to that. But in your quiet time, you're going to want to study those questions, and I will have the list of them in the show notes so that you can take a look at them later. Everybody has a superpower that they do better than anyone else, or that they have the potential to do better than anybody else with lots of practice and refinement. So you want to spend time figuring out what your superpower is and then working on it and refining. Remember Malcolm Gladwell, his book Outliers, that takes 10,000 hours of practice to be world class at something. So when you discover what your purpose is, you want to spend that 10,000 hours of practice to become world class. Do you know what your purpose is? The reason that you were put on this planet? If you don't, it's something that you should work on. I believe that there's 4 things God put me on this earth to do. I believe that God built me to write. He built me to teach people things, to solve problems, and to lead people. And when I work in those 4 areas, that's where I excel in life. And when I work in those 4 areas, that's when I get the most satisfaction in what I'm doing. When I'm applying myself in those 4 areas, that's when I'm most effective. So if you can discover those areas where you have a purpose, it's going to make all the difference in the world, where you're going to be able to live a life with more fulfillment than you have now. So spend time thinking about those things. If you already know what they are, spend time pursuing them. Spend time practicing them. Also, too, in those areas, I am constantly trying to learn new things. I'm constantly trying to build myself in those areas. Like I said, when you discover your purpose, you should orient your life to relentlessly pursue that purpose. All right, so that's kind of a little introduction to things here. Now I want to just kind of talk about, there's 2 schools of thought when it comes to figuring out your purpose and how you're going to pursue it with your life. I call the first one the utilitarian approach. And what that is you figure out how to monetize your purpose so you can make a living doing it. Then there's some people where they look at their purpose and they say either, I don't want to monetize it because I'll have to reduce my standards, or I'll have to make it commercialized and I don't want to do that. Or they look at it and say, man, it's going to be tough to make money doing that, and I can make more money doing something else where I can fund my purpose. And I call that the artistic approach. That's where you make money doing something else, so you're able to fund your purpose, like I said, because either you can't or decide not to monetize your purpose. So you have to figure out which way you want to go. Do you want to take the utilitarian approach and make money doing your purpose? Or do you want to take the artistic approach and use your career to fund what you want to do and the reason you were created? I know some people are asking themselves right now, how can I find fulfillment if I'm not able to work every day in my purpose? Because, if you take that artistic approach, you might not be able to work in your purpose every day. You might need to do something else in order to create opportunities to do that. But remember, fulfillment and success, financial success, are not necessarily working together. Sometimes you can have financial success and no fulfillment. Sometimes you can have fulfillment, personal, spiritual, physical fulfillment, and no financial success along with it. Think of people, you hear about people all the time who leave their high-paying corporate jobs to go pursue something that brings them joy, or pursue something that's their purpose. Or, I heard of one guy who left, he was like a high-powered lawyer, making, a couple $100,000 a year, and he left all that to open a surf shop, on the beach in California. Well, I promise you, he's not making as much money at his surf shop as he was as that lawyer, but I'll bet you he has more fulfillment there, being able to surf and serve people who surf and do something that he loves to do. You think about people who are naturalists, who live off the land and get off the grid. They're probably not making a lot of money, but if you've chosen to do that and you live your life in that kind of authentic manner, the odds are high that you're going to have fulfillment in doing that, even though you don't have financial success necessarily. Or here's a great one. There's lots of women and men who feel that raising their children is their highest calling. And they move forward taking care of their children, preparing their children for the world, in some cases homeschooling their kids and living off of one salary, or finding a way to make ends meet where when they're done, they feel incredibly fulfilled, even though maybe they struggle financially, because that choice was worth the financial struggle for the fulfillment that choice produces. Those people I've just described they're likely to have very deep fulfillment with potentially limited financial success. You know, if you're called to be a writer or an artist, there's no guarantee you can make a living doing those things. I'm a writer myself. It's, you know, when I release my novel, who knows if I'll make money doing that. You know, you need to have a great in writing fiction, you need to have a great product, you need to have great marketing, and then you also need luck, because there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who are trying to sell things that they write. There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who believe that they were born to sing. There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who want to paint, or they're drawing things, and they don't make commercial success in that. Look at Vincent van Gogh and Edgar Allan Poe. They are both considered geniuses at their art. And both of them, it's hard to argue that either one of them was not living out their purpose, with Van Gogh with painting and with Edgar Allan Poe with writing. However, both of them died broke. That's just something to keep in mind, that you need to understand the difference between the utilitarian approach and the artistic approach, and then you have to decide which way you're going to go. Let's talk about someone who is making a living in their purpose. You've probably heard of Tony Robbins, the personal development coach and speaker. He's built a very lucrative career in that area. And there's little doubt, if you've ever watched him or seen interviews with him, there is no doubt at all that he gets great fulfillment from helping to grow people. And I think we can all agree that he's figured out how to monetize his purpose in growing people. But you know, I know people have gone the other way, where I think, for example, I have a friend who's a really amazing woodworker. He's a real craftsman when it comes to woodworking. And when you see those amazing things that he creates, I'm sure he could have made a living doing that, but I know he gets great joy from making those things for his friends and for his family and giving them away to people who are close to him. He didn't do that woodworking for his career. He was a real estate agent for his career, and he was a really good real estate agent. And I'm sure he got fulfillment from serving people that way as well. And he did an outstanding job, but he made a good living as a real estate agent. He was able to put money aside, and now he can spend more time in his wood shop than working with buyers and sellers. And I would argue that that time in that wood shop brings him a very deep sense of fulfillment, as he's making heirlooms for his family, for his friends, for his children, for his grandchildren, and he's living out a purpose. If you could see some of these things he creates, you know he's living out a purpose that he was born to do. So which way are you going to go? Are you going to go the utilitarian approach or the artistic approach? Of course, before you decide which way to go, you need to get absolute clarity on your purpose. I've already given you some questions to consider that are going to help you get that clarity, but let me talk also about this. This may seem a little off topic, but I'm going to bring it all back together. I believe that if you want to discover these things about yourself, your purpose, your core values, fulfillment, all the deep thinking things that you need to do, I believe that you need to create an environment for yourself that lends itself, that's a fertile environment that lends itself to self-discovery, to personal development, to getting clarity in what you're thinking about and what you're pursuing. So what I want to do is give you 6 steps to creating that kind of environment, and I will relate them back to purpose as I go through them. All right, so step 1. Step 1 is quiet time. And if you've been listening to the previous episodes of this is a recurring theme, that quiet time. I can't imagine many things more important in your life than having quiet time. Quiet time is where I spend time working on myself, where I learn how my brain works, where I learn how I'm wired, where I contemplate my big questions in my life, where I come up with plans for doing presentations for my team, training for my team. Quiet time is where I do devotionals and spend time with God. Quiet time is, the world is full of noise and distraction. And I am just always amazed at the number of people who do not make an effort to stop the spin and stop the noise, stop the craziness, and just be quiet and see what their mind will bring up to them. I have two different kinds of quiet time. I have my morning planning, which is where I'll go in, and I'll go into in great detail in a future podcast about that morning planning, but I spend some time with my devotional. I spend some time figuring out what I'm going to do during the day, and I spend some time working on my business as opposed to in my business, and doing something to move the ball forward and building my business rather than just being lost in the tasks of the day. But also, too, I protect my energy and my willpower and my confidence during that quiet time by coming up with a plan so that when I walk in the door to start the day, I know exactly what I'm going to do. When I have something happen that causes me not to have that morning quiet time to get ready for the day, I might as well just turn around and go home. Because when I walk in, I can't tell you how difficult it is to be successful and to be productive when you're walking into your work environment and saying, okay, what am I going to do today? That you're setting yourself up for very, very big challenges and making it harder than you need to when you do that. So that's one kind of quiet time, is my morning planning. Another kind that I have is typically I'll do this on the weekends or in an evening where I want to go somewhere that inspires me. And I want to just be quiet and have my journal where I write my thoughts and my ideas. I'll go on my back porch where in the backyard you can see the woods, and we've got bird feeders and hummingbirds flying around and lots of yellow finches feeding at the feeders. Or in the front yard we might have deer or turkey out there, or we might have a groundhog running around. And I go to places for me, nature is inspiring to me, and I'll sit there quietly. I'll have a good cigar, and I'm a bourbon snob, so I'll have an expensive bourbon that I'll sip my bourbon and smoke my cigar and just think about life and just allow thoughts to come to me. Or if there's something specific I'm working on, I'll sit down and just contemplate that one thing and take notes and figure out where I'm at, what I'm doing, writing in my journal and marinating on stuff, really, taking thoughts and laying them out. When I get ready to do a podcast, I sit down and have quiet time on a weekend where I can just think it through and lay out exactly what I want to go over in that podcast. That's what I did before I did this podcast. I sat down with my quiet time. In that quiet time, that relates to finding your purpose. It's pretty obvious. You're going to ask yourself those questions that we talked about at the beginning of this episode, and sit and contemplate them and see where your mind goes with it. And also in your quiet time, if you really want to be working on yourself, if you have issues or problems or areas of your life that you want to change for the better, sit and think about those things and think about the triggers that cause certain behaviors. Think about how your brain is wired so that you can figure out why you do things the way you do, or what you think in different situations, or what emotions come up. Think about how you're built. Our lives don't come with an owner's manual. You got to figure it out for yourself. Quiet time allows you to get to know yourself intimately, makes your decision making better. And you're more likely to make better decisions and be more creative when you have that time away from noise and distractions. So that's the first step, is quiet time. Step 2, you want to step outside your comfort zone on a daily basis. You want to develop a sense of adventure and try new things, do things that scare you. And the reason you want to do this is because when you're not stepping out of your comfort zone on a daily basis, your comfort zone is shrinking. And as your comfort zone shrinks, you become less adventurous, you become more sedentary, you become more of a slug, really, if you're not constantly in expanding your comfort zone. And where that works with purpose is when you step outside of there, you discover new things. You learn things about yourself that you didn't know when you're facing fear. Here's something interesting to think about when you're afraid to step outside your comfort zone. Your body reacts exactly the same when you have fear and when you have excitement. The only difference is how your brain frames it. So if you've got that thing you're afraid of and you want to step out of your comfort zone and do it even though you're fearful of it, you just need to reframe it as being excited about it. All those extreme sports people who are jumping out of planes and bungee jumping and doing all kinds of crazy stuff that looks terrifying, they don't realize they're terrified because they're so excited. If you can learn to reframe it so that you step out of that comfort zone and you do the things that scare you, the world opens up to you where you can learn all sorts of things about yourself, and that's going to help you find your purpose. And here's the other thing too. When you step out of that comfort zone, you find something that resonates with you or brings you joy, you got to keep exploring it because you don't know where that's going to lead. All right, so that's step 2, stepping outside your comfort zone on a daily basis. Step 3, you want to surround yourself with people you admire and people who are actively living out their purpose. These are people that you aspire to be like. Ask yourself these questions when you're trying to figure out which people you want to hang out with. What traits do you admire in others, and who do you know who has those traits? Here's another question. Who is great at something you want to do? Or even better, who is someone who's great at something they chose to go after? What can you learn from these people? If you find these people and spend time with them, you want to ask them questions and learn from them. One of the things that my grandmother used to tell me all the time is, other people have said this too, but I remember my grandmother saying, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in that proportion. When you're meeting with these people who are further down the road than you and you're learning from them and you're allowing them to mentor you, don't worry about trying to impress them with what you know or who you are or what you can do. Ask them questions, then step back and let them teach you. How does this relate to your purpose in life? Well, when you're around people who are living out their purpose, you're going to see clues of how you can live out your own purpose. When you're around people who have traits that you admire, you're going to see how you can take admirable traits and make them a part of who you are. And remember, our purpose, like when we talked about the timeless things that we do in business and in life that help us to be successful, it all comes down to it's all about people. You can see how these other folks treat people, so maybe you can learn how to treat people better yourself. And when you're serving people and playing out your purpose in a way that serves people, down the road you'll have an opportunity to be that mentor to somebody else and help somebody else move along the road like these folks will help you. So then we have step 4. Step 4, this one's really important. You want to aggressively weed out negative people and negative thoughts from your life. Don't listen to the naysayers. Most people stop dreaming by the time they reach 30 years old. They get through at school, they get into a career, maybe they have a family, and then they just shut off their dreams and live out life and spend their whole week waiting for the weekend, every weekend waiting for their vacations waiting for their retirement, and their life basically stops. They're in a time warp. Don't be one of those people. And those are the folks, too, who are most likely to tear down other people. People who are on the sidelines, afraid to get into the game, it's much easier for them to tear somebody else down than reignite their own dreams and have the courage to go after them. So have the courage to go after your dreams and don't let the haters get after you. Remember, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is admitting there's fear and going forward and doing it anyway. When the haters hate, don't let them cap your dreams. Don't let them dissuade you from going after what you've dreamed about with all that you've got. Remember, the only person that can put limits on you is you. Get rid of that negativity from other people. Choose to be an optimist. Get the words "I can't" out of your vocabulary, and don't let anybody else tell you you can't. Instead of those negative Nellies, hang out with people who encourage you. Here's what happens, and here's how this relates back to finding your purpose. When you're hanging around with negative people, or you're allowing negative people to have power over you, that shrinks shrinks your dreams. It shrinks your brain power. It shrinks your comfort zone. And when you're in a shrinking zone instead of an expanding comfort zone, you're not going to step out and go after those things that you know you were born to do, because you're going to allow fear to get in the way, or you're going to allow other people to tell you it can't work. So you want to do away with all those negative people. Here's something to think about too as far as negative people go. We live in some of the most amazing times ever in the history of the world. There's nothing that can't be done. Miracles happen every day, and people accomplish the impossible every day. Peter Diamandis calls it going after your moonshot. And by that he means, think back to JFK when in the early 1960s he said, we're going to go to the moon by the end of the decade. Nobody knew how they were going to get to the moon by the end of the decade. Yet everybody got together and came up with this incredible plan and worked at it and came up with solutions to things, and they went to the moon. If people could do that with things, with technology way inferior to what we have now, what is there that you can't do? There's nothing you can't do. So don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it. All right, so step 5. This is hugely important. Stop lying to yourself. Life is full of challenges, and when you acknowledge what you're up against, you're going to be able to come up with a realistic plan to overcome it. If you pretend that the challenges don't exist, they're going to defeat you. Why is this important to finding your purpose? Well, when you start working on your purpose, if you're lying to yourself or you're an excuse maker, some people have a PhD in making excuses. They come up with just all kinds of excuses. Anything that goes wrong, any failure that they have, it's never their fault. It's always fate has conspired against them. If you don't accomplish something you set out to do because you just didn't do it, admit to yourself. Even if you don't admit to other people, admit to yourself that you didn't do it because you didn't want it enough. Or admit to yourself that you didn't do it because you were lazy in that moment. You wanted to watch TV instead of doing what you could have done to improve yourself. Just admit it to yourself and don't make those excuses. When you make excuses, if you're going after your purpose and you discover your purpose and you know you have to work at it and get better at it and be sold out to being awesome at it, well, when you're an excuse maker, you're going to allow that to eat away at that purpose. You're going to allow that to stop you from pursuing it with all that you've got, because the first time you meet a challenge, you're going to make an excuse why you didn't do what you thought you wanted to do. If you failed at it, you're instead of looking in the mirror and saying, here's why I failed, here's what I didn't do that I should have done, here's the obstacle that tripped me up that I can overcome next time. If you don't do those things and really study them, you're never going to achieve what you want to achieve. So don't tolerate those excuses. And when you do fail, immediately, failure, by the way, is a part of success. Failure is just a step on the road to success. If you think of Edison, when he came up with the incandescent light bulb, he said, it took 1,000, he had 1,000 failures before it happened, and they said to him, well, how did that feel, failing 1,000 times before you invented the light bulb? And he said, well, I didn't fail 1,000 times. It just found out it took 1,000 steps to create it. So if you can have that kind of attitude where when you fail, you do an autopsy, you figure out what went wrong, you figure out what you'll do differently next time, and then you get moving in a positive direction. Another part of that too is when you realize you're going the wrong way, don't make excuses. Don't lie to yourself because you don't want to admit you're going the wrong way. You don't feel like putting in the effort to go in a different direction that you should go in. When you realize it, admit it, change direction, and do it immediately. It's never too late to change your direction. All it takes is courage. And if you're going in the wrong direction, every step you go takes you further and further away from the direction you want to go in. Don't lie to yourself. Don't make excuses. Pursue your purpose, and don't allow yourself to sabotage yourself by lying to yourself or making excuses. All right, so now on to number 6, which is the last step. Never stop learning. Learning is the fountain of youth for your brain. If you stop using your brain, you're going to lose it. So what inspires you? Seek out more information on that. Read, listen to podcasts, learn new activities, ask all kinds of questions. All these people that you meet with, ask them questions and learn from them. Charles Tremendous Jones said, the only difference in us years from now is going to be in the books we read and the people we meet. So I would add podcasts to that as well. But if you don't do those things and don't expand your horizons and don't learn new things, there may be a purpose out there that you don't know about yet that you won't learn about because you're not learning. And when your brain is being used on a regular basis, it's going to keep you younger than if you stop using it. Develop your curiosity and try to learn something from everybody that you meet. All those things are steps that if you do these 6 things that we talked about, you're going to create a fertile environment where you're going to have achievement and self-discovery. And if you're working at discovering your purpose, it's going to be an environment where your purpose will become apparent to you over time. All these things that we're talking about, purpose, core values, fulfillment, they're things that don't happen overnight. You need to work at them and think about them and study them and spend time living with what you've come up with for a while before you move on and study them some more. Take that purpose, those purposes that you discover, filter them through your core values, get the 2 areas into alignment so you can start moving towards fulfillment, and then make that purpose who you are. Just let it become you, where you're pursuing it every day. Every day you're taking steps towards living out your purpose. If you're not spending a huge portion of your time working towards your purpose or figuring out what it is, or once you know it, learning more about it and getting better at it, you need to figure out how you can reorient your life so you can spend more time on it. So that's the podcast for today. I've really enjoyed spending some time. Look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Please subscribe to Student of Life at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you go to for your favorite podcasts. Visit us online at studentoflifepodcast.com. That's studentoflifepodcast.com. We are on Facebook at Student of Life. Email us at joe@studentoflifepodcast.com. If you enjoyed the show, help us spread the word by telling someone you know about Student of Life. And please join us again next time. Thanks!